beautiful day today, it looks like, as I look out my window. Thanks for joining. We're here today to talk about your endpoint management roadmap. Not simply moving from group policy to Intune, but how are we scaling our environment? How are we ensuring that we're doing the right stuff to have an effective move to adopt more cloud services? So I'm Kevin again. I've been doing this for quite a long time. I actually was part of a team at a company called Desktop Standard where we built what is now called Advanced Group Policy Management and Group Policy Preferences. Back in the day, we called those GPO Vault and Policymaker Pro. But I joined Microsoft through an acquisition, and I spent most of the last 20 years there helping grow the Intune environment, both as a feature product manager, program manager, and then moving into work with customers and partners directly as they started to leverage more of the deep capabilities. Anyway, I've been doing it a long time. So has my buddy Danny. Danny, you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. Danny Ferry coming from Vancouver, Canada, out on the Pacific side. Not as pretty a day out there as Kevin, but but it's nice anyways. Yeah, as Kevin mentioned, I've been in the industry as well for 25 to 30 years and with a wide range of expertise. So I'm excited to get started with this webinar because I know it's going to be relevant to many people in our audience today.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a fun one, and I'm glad to have folks back. Look forward to continued discussions. Today, we want to talk about, as I mentioned, this moment that we're in where we're moving from an on-prem endpoint management infrastructure or general configuration environment to the cloud. We're starting to adopt more cloud services, especially Microsoft Intune, the de facto standard, the clear most popular on the market. And that moment where we're living in this hybrid environment, we've got to peel that apart a little bit so that we can understand the implications of the move. And that gets into differences between GP and Intune. It gets into different techniques that we need to call on when we're troubleshooting and doing forensics. And essentially, how do I continue to manage this hybrid environment? Um, at SCM Software for many, many years, right? I think we're entering our 20th year, or we've been around for 20 years, and we've addressed issues for configuration management that help you from a reporting perspective, a compliance perspective, an auditing perspective, a change management perspective. All of these pieces come together, and we actually try to meet folks where they are. So as your business need moves, what does that mean for your tooling? How do you change your processes and tooling to adopt to these new environments? Because I want to ensure that not only my IT professionals on my team, but the end users have limited disruptions when we start to change fundamentally how we do things. We also don't want to look at our past and take all of the junk that hasn't been cleaned up and move it to our environment. We don't want to inherit new issues. We want to ensure that we've done our work, held ourselves accountable to create a clean environment that we're going to. We're going to talk a little bit about Intune technology gaps, and gaps, differences, variations, but different ways to look at your configuration environment. But before we get to that, and before we get to more meat around hybrid governance and change, Danny, when we actually go through this prepare for Intune, what are some of the things that we should consider?
Yeah, and I mean, we can see them here on the screen, and this is definitely not an exhaustive list, but some of the things that we do need to consider is that, Intune is a different management model than group policies. So, the organization might have difficulty just transitioning to that mindset. Um, Eliminating duplicates and conflicts, identifying incompatible settings, which you're going to be talking about in the next minute, and aligning managed settings with regulatory needs. This is a big one. Over the years, we've gotten so used to settings in GPOs and aligning those settings with regulatory needs, HIPAA, SOX, PCI, so forth. Now we're transitioning to Intune profiles and trying to find those settings or making sure that those settings get applied as well, according to the regulatory needs, can be a challenge or can be something different that you need to consider. What are some of the gaps, Kevin, that you have highlighted on our next?
Yeah, before I move on to the gaps, I actually wanted to ask you about this regulatory needs piece.
Oh,
So we
right,
have different industries have different needs, right? So I need to worry about HIPAA because I'm in healthcare. I need to worry about whatever because I'm in manufacturing. But you and I have also talked a lot with customers who are either in the military or top secret environments, and they get
right.
into meeting their needs through a different mechanism. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure. They also need to adhere to a regulatory um, framework, which is called STIG. A lot in the federal government and state governments, provincial, if you're in Canada, do need to follow this regulatory framework. Um, and yeah, that's pretty important for them
Yeah,
too. I
it
mean,
actually is because it highlights one of that technical differences as we move to Intune,
right.
because those STIGs or other baselines that you get from third parties, like those STIGs are baselines coming from the government in the US. And these Microsoft security baselines we used to download and import into GP, and now there's some integration in Intune, and then we have other orgs that are doing it. They get very, very complicated. So what
Yeah,
we saw, for example, with CIS, they had these amazing documents that outlined their baseline hardening requirements. They were all GP. And there were so many pages. I think one of them was 1,300 pages of just registry settings and how it mapped to a GP setting. And now they have in the past year, maybe 18 months, they've added all the Intune stuff, which made the doc much bigger, right? Because
bigger, yeah.
that's the core difference is GP feeds the admin experience through um, this ADMX format. So we feed the administrative experience through essentially a text document that defines the settings and how to present it. On the Intune side, Windows machines have this MDM stack, this management stack that has to align with these CSPs. It's a different document format that's defining what the settings look like. All of those you can imagine are driving the evolution and the growth of the settings catalog. So instead of simply having this, although large, pretty static set of settings in group policy, in Intune, every month they can add more settings to the settings catalog in a very efficient manner. So you got to keep on top of that. Danny had a bullet in his last slide on discovering scripts. This is going to be one of the big challenges as you move, making a determination that your investment in configuration and group policy is valid and necessary. And if it is, how do I move that? Finding scripts really important because you want to do some analysis to determine how important they still are in the modern world. And group policy preferences, they don't technically exist in Intune. Um, Although some of the settings that you managed in GP preferences can be covered by settings catalog settings, the preferences themselves can't, right? So it's a big girth of stuff that you've managed for many, many years, and you've managed it in unique ways. Being able to add that item level targeting capability that allows you to say, oh, this setting, even though it's being communicated to 1,000 devices, I have this item level target that limits the scope and only applies it to a certain configuration. And if you don't recall this from GP preferences, one of the real values of the item level targeting was they were driven by APIs. They weren't simply queries that were running and taking a lot of time. If you needed to say, oh, deploy this to 1,000 machines, but only have it impact laptops, I can look for the battery. And looking for the battery through an API call is super quick. doing it through a WMI query might be a little bit longer. So anyway, really important thing that people have used quite a bit. And there's many other differences, not only in how you work, but in the underlying technology. Like right now in Intune, we have the Microsoft Graph. And that graph is this API that allows you to sort of interact with the service really deeply in a very meaningful way. We didn't have that kind of thing. Like the work that we did at SDM Software back in the day to really break apart GP and be able to manage it in a more deep and meaningful way was a lot of work. And Intune has introduced, or Microsoft has introduced the graph, which helps ease the pain. It makes things a little bit easier. One
Yeah, and
message though
to
that's
that point, Kevin, if you go back to that point, that first bullet that you have, discover group policy settings not available in Intune today, they're constantly updating it. So, you
every
know,
month.
like today it might not be, that setting might not be there. Next week it may be there. So constantly being familiar with what settings have been added in Intune will also be beneficial in your transition.
Yeah, 100%. And we see this here all the time because um, one of our tools, when you launch it, it will actually tell you what settings aren't compatible with Intune. And every time you launch the tool, it checks in with Intune and updates its schema. So it starts to understand differences as it evolves. And like Danny said, and most of us are used to, Microsoft does a service release for the Intune service every month. So we have this experience where every month we can, if you're not looking at a Scott Sawyer's blog on LinkedIn, he's one of the dev directors on Intune, and he publishes a What's New blog every month. Um, he just scratches the surface of the new stuff. There's always new settings and new features and new workloads and new payloads. So um, and you're up for not a surprise probably, but you're up for a big move because in July, Microsoft is introducing a lot of new capabilities to their E3 and E5 license holders because they're going to integrate the Intune suite into your experience, which is brilliant. Great capabilities that have been unavailable to folks who aren't willing to pay the large license cost for that new stuff. All of this rolls up into the point that there's no direct one-to-one mapping from group policy to Intune. And although organizations like ours have done a lot of work to help with that mapping, there's really no mapping from Intune back to GP. So if you're in Intune trying to do the reverse analysis, that's much more difficult. But from our perspective, when I'm looking at GP and trying to figure out what's going on in Intune, I have tooling where I can do that. So essentially, you have a new environment that is exciting and shiny and lots of new stuff to work with, but it's going to take some time to think about your sort of mental paradigm shift as I move. So embrace it, give it a big hug. One of the things that we did to try to help you all, help organizations and help IT folks as they're making this move directly related to GP preferences is essentially to go and find your GP preferences in Intune, or sorry, GP preferences, capture them into a script that's Intune ready to be deployed. And I'll give you a real quick example of what this looks like. I essentially have a command line experience called GPO to Intune, and it allows you to do a couple different things. The main thing is I can point to a specific category within GP preferences, or I can simply say, hey, grab all of the preferences in this GPO. And I can, and what we're doing is we're taking that data and articulating in a script, and the script is I'm not going to go through the details of this because reading PowerShell code is probably not what everyone wants to do on a Tuesday afternoon, but um, very simple. So now I can pick up this script and deploy it through Intune as a platform script. So I can actually get it out to my devices. How it's working is really interesting. And we learned this when back in the day, 20 years ago, when I was at Desktop Standard, um, because when I would demo things, I leveraged a capability where GP preferences could trigger updates if I managed them through local policy. So that's essentially what we're doing here is we're grabbing the script, deploying it through Intune. It applies the preference settings as a local policy setting, so now you can manage it the same way, including your ILTs and all kinds of fun stuff. So free download, you'll get a link later. Please check it out. Really super helpful and very easy tool to run. I think you'll enjoy it. I think we went pretty quick through that beginning, Danny, but let's jump into a quick demo and
Yeah.
circle back and cover some additional stuff. So I'm going to turn it over to Danny, who's going to walk through the product for us.
So this is Change Manager for Group Policy and Intune 2.0. This is going to be released next week. So you on the webinar are the first eyes of Change Manager for Group Policy and Intune 2.0. When you sign
Just
in,
announced today, I believe.
right, yeah, it was just announced today. When you launch CMGPI Change Manager for Group Policy and Intune, you'll notice right away that it is a web UI. You have various sign-in options to be able to sign in with username and password, Windows authentication, or even SSO with Entra ID. When you do sign in, you're presented with a dashboard. You get to see the state of your GPOs, any containers, whether they be OUs at the domain level, or even any sites that you might be linking GPOs to, as well as the state of your Intune profiles. Under My Objects, this is where you are presented with the objects that are delegated to you as the person that's signed in. So under GPOs, you'll see a list of GPOs that are assigned to you. You get to see the administrative container, which is a delegated container that allows administrators to do some distributed delegation. Under containers, this is a list of all the OUs and domains or even sites that are delegated to you that you can link GPOs to that OU or to the domain or to the site. Because just as important as it is to have change workflow on GPOs as you're making changes to settings, it is just as important to control or even do change control on where you're linking those GPOs. You can create a lot of havoc by linking the wrong GPO to an OU or to a domain. And then what I like is that you also see the Intune profiles here that are delegated to you. So in a single pane of glass, you get to see all three types of objects.
Hey, Danny, I noticed on
Yeah,
GPOs you were doing some tagging there. Can you
right.
walk through that a little bit? That's a new feature in 2.0.
Yeah, this is a great feature. So you can see here I have Windows 10 computer baseline. Uh, the tagging allows us to do annotation or even tagging for specific frameworks that compliance frameworks that we talked about earlier. You can see here I've put some as an example, HIPAA or STIG. If you had another one, if you wanted to do PCI. Um, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever that may be, and you can add multiple tags or multiple annotations to a specific
Yeah,
GPO, just to highlight that that GPO goes according to that framework.
yeah, super
So that's an
helpful.
awesome. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see this evolve. But one of the things to point out here is this product comes with about 100, a little more than 100 commandlets to help you automate through the process. And I find being able to look at the tag library, like all the tags that are in play, can be very helpful to help you manage it in a better way. But anything to help organize, because of course you're going to get a lot of GPOs and things in here. But anyway, very
Yeah,
interesting.
no, for sure. And later on, I'll kind of talk about the setting search, which you can
Oh yeah.
also search on tags as well. I wanted to kind of show a little bit, seeing that we're talking about transitioning to Intune, how would we go ahead and do that? With 2.0, we've introduced the ability to also create a new Intune profile. So if you had a specific profile that you needed to create, you could simply do that. You can check out the profile after it's created so that you can quickly start making some changes. You can clone an existing profile. This is what I love this portion here, that you can be able to clone an existing profile so that you're not doing reinventing things from scratch. And then also, we talked about an administrative container. We also have the ability to add that profile or the GPO to an administrative container. So your realm of delegation, what's been delegated to you. So it can quickly adds it there after it's done. Now, when you go and need to make a change, you can go ahead and check out a GPO here. And once you've checked out the GPO, you're presented with other options. You have the ability to edit the settings of the GPO. You can take a look at some version differences. And you can also take a look at the history if you've made any changes previously, what the editor comment is, ticket number, and so forth. But for now, I'm just going to go ahead and edit this setting. And that takes me to Intune. And you'll notice here that it says temp. So we don't actually make changes to the production profile. Same thing with GPOs. We don't make changes to the production profile when you're doing the editing. We do it to a temporary profile. And then once it's approved and deployed, that's when that becomes production. So I'm just going to edit this setting here, allow adding non-Microsoft accounts manually. I'm going to allow that, review, save, and then it's a simple thing of coming back in, selecting the check-in, pick the urgency level that you have, the severity level that you feel is appropriate, add your ticket number, made a change, and then
We can
you
enforce that, which I love that you can enforce.
right. Yeah, that option there can be enforced. There are some organizations that make that optional, but the majority of them are enforced. Now, when I select, once I've checked it in, your approver will get an email showing the differences, the what was before and after, and then they can make an informed decision whether they should approve that. So I'm just going to, for the sake of the demo, go ahead and approve this right away, and then I'm going ahead and deploy it. Now, this is an option. This is an awesome option that we have to either deploy immediately or schedule to deploy. No more waiting till 12 o'clock at night to be able to deploy changes. You can just go ahead and schedule to deploy, and it will go ahead and do it based on the the date and the time that you choose. But for now, I'm just going to go ahead and deploy immediately. And then once it's deployed, your approver, the editor, so it would be me, will also get an email stating that it was deployed successfully. The next feature that I really enjoyed, I talked a little bit earlier, was the global settings search. This is an awesome, we have a lot of customers that comment on how much they appreciate this feature. If there was a word or a value that I'm looking for, I'm trying to find out which GPOs contain a password setting. I can be a little bit more explicit if I want. It will then go ahead and find all the GPOs that contain that word password. I can look at the details. If I wanted to go ahead and change that, I just select more details and it'll take me to that GPO. Same thing with Intune profiles. You know, we've spoken with customers who have said that the biggest pain for Intune they find is not knowing exactly what's in the profile. So if they're trying to look for something, it's hard for them to try to find where that profile, where that setting is configured. So if I wanted to look for this password setting, I could find it and it will go ahead and find it in Intune. And once again, you have that details pane. I can take a look at the details and then more settings if I want to make a change. Moving on to delegations. Now we have about 10 various roles in 2.0. The previous version had about 7 roles. We've added a few different roles. I product administrator, reports administrator. I'm going to talk a little bit about our new reporting feature. Being able to create, you can delegate who can create an Intune profile or a GPO profile and so forth. And as you can see from my demo here, you can assign these profile or these roles to either an Entra ID account or an on-prem Active Directory account, as well as groups. And again, you can assign multiple roles to an individual or to a security group. So I mentioned that there were 10 under the objects. These are object-specific roles. Now we have approver and editor, and we have an optional role that you can enable called deployer. I haven't enabled it in this role in this demo here, but you can enable it. So for example, if you don't want the approver to approve and deploy, you can assign the deployer role back to the editor or maybe to a third person for a third level of review. Maybe it might be a change manager or maybe an operations engineer. We also have restricted policies. This is my favorite for GPOs, being able to restrict who can make a change at the policy level. So for example, we have this password policy. I have assigned AC editor as the only person that has the ability to make changes to password policies. And so while others may be able to go ahead and make a change to other policies within a GPO. When it comes to password policies, only this AC editor is able to do that. And they'll be notified saying that, you're about to change a policy that has a password setting, which you're not allowed to change. Do you still wish to continue? And they can go ahead and make changes to other things. I mentioned that we were going to talk about reporting. We have the ability to also do some reports here under reporting. We can report on GPOs, containers, so any change history that's being done on organizational units or, as I mentioned, domains or sites, as well as Intune profiles, any profile, Intune profile change history. So who's made a change in the last, I'd say in the last week. I can run and generate this report and it will create a nice PDF. I can choose what I'd like, either HTML or CSV. And then once you've created that report, you can take a look at the report and you get a nice overview of the types of changes that have been made on that Intune profile. So you can see here that there are some that were done. It tells you the version number, the comment severity, as well as the ticket number.
So I love this new reporting feature. I think I've had discussions with some early folks on the ability to export these reports out to CSV and being
Yeah.
able to sort of build into their automation framework or their config as code environment or DevOps pipeline things so that they can react to the results of these types of reports. I think that's fascinating. But I do have
Yeah.
to say my favorite feature of this new product has got to be what we're calling tamper resistance. Can you go into that a little bit, Danny? How we can figure out what's going on outside of the context of Change Manager?
Right, for sure. So we've introduced a new feature called anti-tamper GPO tampering feature. What this does is, so Change Manager has, even in previous versions, did tell you if someone made a change outside of Change Manager, either by going into Group Policy Management console, they make a change outside of Change Manager, it would tell you if there was an out of band change. But it would tell you at the point of, um, when you go and check out that GPO. Now, what we have done is we've introduced this anti-tampering agent that it will notify you that someone has made a change to a GPO that was done outside of Change Manager. But
To
it
a
goes for
to a GPO that's already controlled by Change Manager, right? So
yeah,
those that we're aware
yeah,
of. Yeah.
yeah, good point. But it goes a little bit further. Some hackers, what they do is they'll go to sysvol, and if I have my domain here, they'll go to sysvol, and for example, they'll go into sysvol and they will modify an INF file in the actual GPO and change settings or inject and or introduce settings in there. And the anti-tampering feature in Change Manager will also notify you if someone has done that at the sysvol level. And that is an awesome feature. Here, I just wanted to kind of show you
Incredible.
um, an example. This is an example that of, you get a notification that there was an out of band change. And this is, I made this change in GPMC. However, if there was a change that was done in sysvol, it changes the message. A possible malicious change was detected. And you could see here that I made a change to this GPT template. So it's an awesome feature. We're really excited about this feature that we're introducing, and we
It's
know
really
that
great.
it's going to benefit our customers.
Yeah, I think the ability to catch changes that are made just because someone was using the wrong tool is awesome, but the ability to find those nefarious changes for the folks who are actually digging into sysvol, um, that's
Yeah,
a huge benefit. I think we'll catch a lot of
yeah.
that.
Yeah, and there's so many more features and enhancements that we've done in version 2.0. So I encourage everybody to, you know, uh, reach out to us, ask some questions, download a trial if they wish to do so, and we can even help them go through the POC if they'd like.
Is
So
that
I'm handing.
you're handing it back over, Danny?
Yeah,
All right, let me find my screen with Danny's pretty face on it. Thank you for that. I mean, it's interesting because going through not only all of the features that we've had in this product for a few years, but adding these new features, there's a lot in there. There's a lot to cover. It's a very it's an easy product to POC. So to get into your environment and kick the tires, really helpful. I noticed this morning one of the marketing directors at Microsoft, Lior Bella, who's really one of the big Intune advocates out there, he had a post about MDOP going away, the desktop optimization pack. Of course, that's been near and dear to us because of the group policy impact with AGPM end of lifing. And for some of us who have been around for a long time, I was the product manager on the original product before Microsoft purchased it. So it's sort of like the end of an era here. But what Lior proposed was that for each product in MDOP, you have an alternate solution. And for endpoint management, he talked about a capability that Microsoft has put into Intune that is very, very limited in its function. So the ability to do approval-based things and maybe trigger some automation to auto-approve things was there to protect against certain infiltrations that we've seen in the news. But to be clear, and we all know this practically because our change management needs are far beyond just simply the reporting thing. When I'm thinking about change management and group policy, we got used to a certain flow with advanced group policy management or some other solution. But now when we move to Intune, we want that flow. We want to have multiple layers of approval. We want to be able to very quickly look at difference reports and what have you. So your change management needs, if they've done anything, they've grown. So what I've had in GP, I need more, not less. And I think that's
Yeah.
one of the reasons that we really focus a lot on this. Because at the end of the day, change management is great. It's a practical part of our operational environment, but it leads us to a compliance state. And getting to that compliance state where I can prove that devices have actually processed policies and are functioning along with our admin intent. That could be, like
Hmm.
Danny said, the STIGs or baselines or regulatory needs or whatever. Do I know that those devices are compliant? That's the piece de resistance, right? That's the end game.
Kevin, I just wanted to kind of highlight a little bit about that Intune multi-admin approval that you mentioned that Microsoft kind of
Yeah,
introduced.
please, please.
As you mentioned, they're basic features that they've kind of introduced. Some of the things that you don't get with that is you don't get full RBAC roles with multi-admin approvals. You don't get a chance to do any version control. You don't have the ability to roll back in case something does happen with Change Manager on the Intune portion. You also have the ability to roll back and version control. Comparison reports, the things that we find customers love. That once again helps administrator or approvers to be able to have informed decisions where they're not wasting time trying to figure out what changed. That
Yeah.
that comparison report, that's lacking on multi-admin approval. There's so much more. I just wanted to highlight a couple in case anyone in the audience was interested in knowing what some of the changes were or what
Yeah,
some of
of
the
course.
differences
And,
were.
I think it reminds us that for the past many, many years since Microsoft came into existence, they've always sort of positioned themselves as a platform company. So when I see Intune, even though it's an interesting solution, the real value of it is the platform components. But most organizations don't want to spin up the time. It's expensive. It's, cumbersome, but to bake their own solutions, right? They want to rely on organizations that are experts in endpoint management or configuration or whatever area and build those solutions out. So going back to something we talked about earlier, your life cycle of, oh, I've got my legacy environment. I need to do some analysis and prepare it to migrate. Maybe I do some consolidation, or maybe there's some M&As at play. So reporting and tooling to do the migrations to get me to a state where I'm hybrid. So like Danny showed, hey, I have an issue with some very critical security setting. Where does that exist in my group policy environment? Really great to have that available quickly, but maybe more importantly, show me that same setting in Intune. How is that referenced in Intune? Avoiding conflicts, avoiding duplicates, creating efficiencies so that you don't sort of shoot yourself in the foot and you don't
Mhm.
impact your end users, right? These folks need to work. If they're not working, the company's not progressing. So if I have a really cumbersome change environment that doesn't allow the right changes to get out to devices and users, then we're impacting their ability to be successful. And we also, not only we at SDM, but folks around the space care deeply about how all of this impacts administrators. So we have to think about meeting people where they are. I'm a huge fan of PowerShell, huge fan of automation. I've been playing with it, working with it since it was Monad, since back in the day. I keep reminding myself how old I am, which is not healthy. Um, but I love that aspect of it. But that's not for everyone. Not all organizations have embraced automation in a meaningful way. And maybe that's a skill set they're developing, or maybe it's just not important. So what does the UI provide? And if we do need to leverage certain things to make an admin's life easier, like the reporting features that Danny walked through, wow, what a huge improvement to the day-to-day experience, because I can run a job that just gives me a report every month that says, hey, these are all the changes that occurred and who made them. And if I choose to dump that out to a CSV, the world is my oyster. Show me all the changes that Danny has made. Not in a checking up on people's work perspective, but ensuring that we're meeting our customers, our end users where they need to be. Um, it's
Yeah, on that, Kevin, on that note there, I know in some organizations, for example, if you have a change record open in your ITSM software after you've done the change, you need to kind of prove that you've made that change. So running a report and saving it as a PDF, attaching that to the record to show that it was done, what time, what change record was done, is very beneficial.
Yeah, and I'll take it one step farther again. Now I've made the change, and some auditor says, show me that you made the change, and I can
Yeah,
give them that data real easily. But
yeah,
now I need to see, did the change effectively configure the systems that it was intended to? And that gets into our compliance story. How are we ensuring
right.
compliance? Not not just that the admin intent is set, but is that admin intent reflected on the actual devices?
Yeah,
It's interesting because I think that also gets into troubleshooting and reporting differences and issues, right? So it's funny for those of us who have been working with group policy for so many years, some of the troubleshooting flows, some of our processes are just sort of nature, right? They're just so natural because we've been doing it for so long. Intune troubleshooting isn't necessarily more challenging, it's just different. And maybe it relies on skill sets that have not yet been developed, right? The Microsoft Graph is a perfect example. If I'm trying to dig deep to try to figure things out, what do I have available to me? And the reporting side of that means we have a solution here. You've probably had solutions if you were an AGPM shop, and you've had other things natively in GPMC to look at some core reporting, but being able to take that to a new level and say, no, I really need to dive deep, and I need someone to help me guide me to the right reports instead of going through that tedious process of building my own internal reporting systems. So even though that also, like automation, is a very interesting environment to think about, it's really nice to have your core reporting at your fingertips. So, like as Danny said, there's a need to share an update. I can get it quickly, responsive, even scheduled if needed. So lot of interesting stuff. That last bullet on this slide, I think, though, is something that we hear, and Danny, maybe you can share some of your experience here, but we hear this from customers all the time. We've been managing our environment with group policy for however many years, maybe 20, maybe 26, who knows? Now I need to ensure that as I embrace Intune, that all of this good stuff and none of the bad stuff, all of the good stuff in that investment that's been made in GP, I can seamlessly get into Intune and manage in an effective way. Um, so, there's a lot to say about hybrid. I think in our experience, hybrid's not going anywhere anytime soon. I think there's some motivations on the Microsoft side as they sort of shrink their organizational size and how they are leveraging AI and doing all kinds of stuff that's in their best interest to get people off of their on-prem investments. But in reality, we're here. We're going to have our on-prem things for a long time because we need them. And for those
yeah,
organizations that are moving cloud only, that's awesome. I just think, again, we need to meet organizations where they are, and not everyone
yeah,
is going to be there. So,
yeah, yeah. And if you can, Kevin, maybe you can share that slide 10 there, hybrid governance and change control, while I talk about that last point that you were saying about leveraging an investment made in group policy. Once
was I
again,
honestly not sharing that whole time, Danny?
yeah, it's okay, not a problem. Um, there we
Oh,
go.
sorry,
Oh,
sorry, sorry, sorry.
number
There we
10,
go.
yeah. Um, yeah, and so that last point is very interesting because, and as you mentioned, group policy for most organizations isn't going to go away. Intune doesn't support servers. And at this point, there are, as you mentioned, there are some settings that Intune doesn't support. And so there are organizations that may keep kind of that hybrid mode where they have some in GPOs and some in Intune. And so you want a product that is able to do the whole gamut that can do change control for both group policies as well as Intune profiles. So that way, that process is the same across both. Larger organizations, they can become very siloed. And so, some organizations when we speak to, they're like, oh, I love this. I love this product for group policies. We need to speak to our Intune department in order to see if they're interested. And that just highlights that, in most organizations, there is a separate department that handles Intune. And most of the time, those organizations want to have the same process for both types of objects.
Yes, and I think it's funny as you were saying that I was sarcastically thinking, and those Intune admins, they're all younger and prettier and healthier, and all of us old GP folks, we've been doing this for so long. I'm just kidding. Those of us who love technology embrace both sides of it, right?
Yeah,
And finding the scenarios, we use this term in enterprise software development called information architecture. So finding those scenarios that even though I do them differently in a new model, they can still follow that same flow. You asked that you responded to a question that was in the Q&A. I want to go a little bit deeper. Someone asked, will group policy be taking over Intune? And Danny hit the highlights. I can't do server management in Intune. That's a big problem for some organizations, but that really only scratches the surface of why an organization may choose to continue their reliance on group policy. Um, I spoke with an organization last week that we're in that mode that I think is really exciting, where every new device in the environment will be a cloud-only device. That's really exciting because they're able to slowly get away from their group policy legacy and move into an Intune endpoint management. They have to consider their servers. They have to consider the gaps. There's a lot of things they will have to worry about. Um, and another thing about that move when I'm thinking about uh, getting rid of my legacy stuff, that organization that we spoke to about new devices are now cloud managed. They hadn't thought about some of the group policy settings that were targeting those users as they get a new system that's cloud only, and then suddenly they have a system that's not configured to meet their administrative intent because
yeah,
they hadn't done the migration, they hadn't done the analysis of what's important and what's needed. It's actually one of the features of tagging that I've really liked. I think about, hey, this group of IT, they manage configuration for the sales organization. They may be more sensitive to what happens when a salesperson moves to a device that's cloud only. They may know that there's settings in GP that are important to them and they need to ensure, or they have done some GP preferences settings and they need a tool like our GPP to Intune tool to move those preferences to an Intune script, right? So um, there's always going to be new challenges. I think as we learn more and more and more about Intune, and I've spent most of the last 20 years on Intune, well, since 2008-ish. There's always going to be new stuff to learn and keep up with, which is exciting, but we can't lose sight of our GP stuff. We have to really ensure that we protect that side of the world. I'm just checking the time here. It's 11:51. I do see, here's another question. What governance model ensures long-term sustainability rather than just a successful migration? I'm not sure I'm following on the governance model thing, but I do think a successful migration has to adhere to some hybrid needs. It can't just be a shut off, in my opinion. It has to be a gradual move, ensure that the configurations are correctly, and then start to deprecate settings from the legacy platform and enable them in the new one. Any thoughts on that, Danny?
Yeah, no, for sure. And you're not going to have, and once again, I don't know the context around that question, but you're not going to have one model that applies to every corporation. Like governance is unique to each corporation, and while there are models that are out there that can apply to every corporation, generally governance is stipulated by corporate security, your security engineers within the organization, as well as the framework that you might need to adhere to, for example, HIPAA, or as we mentioned, STIG, or PCI or SOX, and so forth.
Feel
Great.
free. I know we had someone raise their hand earlier in the presentation. Um, I think Raj Mishra, you would raise your hand. If anyone has a question and you want to come off mic, we can allow for that, or please use the Q&A section as we're sort of drawing to a close. Any last highlights from you, Mr. Ferry?
No, I think this has been great. Now, remember, folks, Kevin showed the free tool that we released that will help you with transitioning your GPP preferences over to Intune. We have other free tools on the SDM website, so you're welcome to peruse or to look through the website and see if there's any other free tools. We also have other products that might help you in your journey to migrating to Intune or maintaining a hybrid environment. We have reporting pack. We have a GPO migrator that allows you to migrate from GPOs to Intune profiles. And then we also have our compliance manager, which while it is focused on GPOs, it does an awesome job at highlighting what is actually applied on your machine. So which GPOs, which settings, and if you're preparing to go to Intune or you're in the middle of transitioning, having that one report that kind of gives you like an RSOP, a resultant set of policies of what's actually being applied, what the settings are, which GPO is giving you that setting. You can, again, make an informed decision as to, oh, these lists of GPOs are what's being applied on our sales workstations or our other types of workstations. These are the Intune profiles that I need to now update and make sure that they reflect what's being applied on the on-prem workstation.
All right. Thank you, guys. And with that, we'll go ahead and close out. Thank you, everyone, for attending our webinar today. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did.